Jan and I are going to team up for Proposition 26 and 27 because they're both about sports betting. And when competing initiatives are on the ballot, we have to answer the question, what happens if both of them win? We've had that happen in the past in California, conflicting initiatives. And so we know the rule in California's constitution says clearly, if two measures conflict on the same topic and each pass, the one that passes by a higher percentage of the vote takes effect and the other one does not. Anticipating this, Proposition 27 authors wrote into their measure, we the people of California declare that Proposition 27 does not conflict with Proposition 26. And if they both pass, we anticipate there will be a court battle to determine whether that's true. And the court will have to decide through an independent analysis whether those provisions can be operational together or whether they would conflict with one another. So the losing proposition would be, even if both of them pass, the one that gets the fewer number of votes in this court case. So let's dive into what each of them do and whether or not voters want to support them. So Proposition 26 allows in-person roulette, dice games, sports wagering on tribal lands. And the way it is now is gambling is permitted in California only through the state lottery, card rooms, horse racing, and tribal casinos. Sports betting is illegal in California, and tribal casinos are unable to offer roulette and games played with dice. In 2018, the United States Supreme Court eliminated the federal prohibition on sports wagering, so it's left to the states to authorize and regulate sports wagering within their borders, which is why the proponents of Proposition 26 are placing this on the ballot. Proposition 26 asks the voters to approve the following changes. 4 racetracks would offer in-person sports betting. Racetracks would pay the state a share of those sports bets made. Tribal casinos could offer in-person sports betting, roulette, and games played with dice, such as craps, if permitted by individual tribal gaming agreements with the state. And people or groups that believe someone is breaking these laws can file a civil lawsuit in state trial courts. The budget effect is that it would increase state revenues, possibly reaching tens of millions of dollars annually. Some of those revenues would support increased state regulatory and enforced costs that could reach the low tens of millions of dollars annually. Those that support the proposition say that Californians should have the choice to participate in sports wagering at highly regulated, safe, and experienced gaming locations. Steve Stallings says a well-regulated gaming industry is of utmost importance to California's tribal governments and the public. The supporters are a long list of Indian tribes and unions and other organizations. The Federal Indian Gaming Regulatory Act declares that Congress seek to advance tribal economic development, tribal self-sufficiency, and strong tribal governments by allowing gaming. The California Gambling Control Commission is the state regulatory body that acts as the trustee over the revenues into the Indian Gaming Revenue Sharing Trust Fund, a revenue sharing fund that sends money to tribes that don't have casinos or less than 350 slot machines. Because Indian gaming was passed on a previous initiative, it has to come back to the people. The opponents, the cons of this initiative, the California Contract Cities Association says that they overwhelmingly voted to oppose the qualified tribal gaming initiative as it will not benefit the residents or communities, exploiting the Private Attorneys General Act, opening the floodgates for frivolous lawsuits that will harm city revenues that fund vital city services such as roads, schools, homeless services, and fire protection. The mayor of City of Commerce talks about the California cities that depend on the revenues generated through legal gaming at card rooms that have seen devastating impact card room closures have had on municipal budgets and the vital services they fund. And the president of the California Gaming Association has his quote, "The initiative does nothing to advance sports wagering and instead expands the tribal casinos' tax-free monopoly on gaming and reward those operators for prioritizing their own wealth over public safety, health and safety." The opponents, the California Republican Party, other unions that weren't on the previous side, and card room corporations. And Jan will explain Proposition 27.
So Proposition 27 says legalize sports betting and revenue for homeless prevention fund initiative. It also is a constitutional amendment because, again, as Jody explained, we already have a constitutional amendment relative to sports betting, and so we have to make this one as well. This initiative would allow sports betting. Licensed tribes or gambling companies could offer online sports betting over the internet or mobile devices to people 21 years of age or older on non-tribal lands in California. Those offering online sports betting would be required to pay a share of this to the state of sports bets made, and there would be a new state regulatory unit created. Interestingly, it includes this. Normally, the state of California, when an initiative or a constitutional amendment passes, the legislature creates a body of laws to carry that initiative or out. This came with its own pages of laws, and those would be included in the Constitution as well. That's quite unusual. So the budget effect of this is that 10% of the bets minus expenses, and expenses are defined as promotions, prizes, taxes, and by the way, those specifically cannot be limited, are paid into a state trust fund. So 10% minus those costs are paid into a state trust fund. Then the fund must pay all state regulatory costs. So 10% minus costs, then minus the regulatory costs. The remaining funds from that 10% are used to address homelessness and the addiction and mental health issues that face people with homelessness. The other 90% in income would likely cover any regulatory costs that the state would face. By the way, the revenue to the state general fund is specifically exempted from being counted towards the state's Prop 98 guarantee. That guarantee is the amount that is set aside for schools and education. So who is in favor? Major League Baseball has come out in favor, and they say as legalized sports betting continues to expand across the country, Major League Baseball remains committed to protecting the integrity of its games and creating a safe experience for fans who wish to wager. The spokesman for the Pro on 27 campaign says our measure is the only one that would guarantee hundreds of millions each year in solutions to homelessness and mental health support. And a man named Tomakia Moss, CEO of All Home, says, if we permit and regulate online sports betting, California residents should benefit from it. Since 2018, approximately 35 states have legalized sports betting in one form or another, although not all are operational at this time. Those supporters are approximately mayors from 4 cities. Those are Fresno, Long Beach, Oakland, and Sacramento. The American Indian tribes that are not, that do not have casinos, and Major League Baseball. However, the 4 major online sports betting companies in the US are FanDuel, DraftKings, BetMGM, and Caesars. And the committee that qualified this proposition for the ballot was funded by those corporations. Those in favor, I'm sorry, I'm wrong. This is in favor. The people, the Indian interests that are in favor of this are those who have casinos. Those against it are Pat Fong-Shida, President and CEO of the California Asian Pacific Chamber of Commerce. Corporate gambling proposition was written for the sole benefit of out-of-state gambling corporations. This measure would give online gambling corporations near total control of the sports wagering market. Raymond Welsh, Chamber of the Verona Band of Mission Indians in San Diego County. Their measure would authorize the largest expansion of gambling in state history. And Chairman James Silva of the California Nation of Indian Gaming Association says, don't be fooled. These measures are not a fix to homelessness, but rather a massive explosion of gaming that will directly undercut tribal sovereignty. The opponents are essentially the Democratic Party leadership, the Republican Party, and the tribal gaming interests. So that's Prop 27.